I'm Niko. I am a mix of European, and today I'll be speaking about my Italian side, which I didn't grow up with the most traditional household, where you might see like the stuff online about Italian culture, but there are some niche things that I thought were important that I wanted to talk about today. The three values that represent this culture for me would be individualism, large power distance, and long-term orientation. So first, individualism. The textbook definition of this is it refers to people's tendency to take care of themselves and their immediate circle of family and friends. Three examples of this in my life would be autonomy, independence, and la bella figura. Autonomy is basically where I had the opportunity to be responsible for my own actions growing up. These could be actions that represented just me, my family as a whole, or my actions that I chose to do that ended up representing both of us. And a good example of this would be any time that I asked for specific food in the household, my mom would essentially give me the budget that we had for the food that she was going to buy anyways. Except I now had the choice of picking what food was to be bought with that budget. If I bought too many snacks, I wouldn't have enough food to eat. And so I had the opportunity to be practicing autonomy. The second example of this would be independence, where I had the opportunity to pursue sports or certain extracurricular activities as long as I maintained a good grade in school. And it was stressed that even if my family wasn't a fan of it, I would still have the opportunity to be doing stuff like that. A good example of one of those sports would be like soccer, football, bowling, stuff that my family wasn't necessarily a huge fan of doing, partaking in, or maybe even supporting me in. But I would still get cool trophies like this one. My third one is la bella figura. Essentially, I needed to present myself in a proper manner. And this was very important while growing up and instilled in me, and that is something that I still practice to this day. Next, something that my grandmother indirectly taught me was large power distance. The textbook definition of this is to openly accept that a boss is higher and as such deserves more formal respect and authority. Three examples of this in my life would be respecting my elders, hierarchy, and formal communication. On the topic of respecting elders, essentially it would be whoever has more life experience has more knowledge. They're more well equipped to handle situations. And so anytime that I needed to do something, I wanted to do something, I would always be referring to the older ones, even if it was my older brother, my mom, my dad, grandparents, great-grandparents. They were all my authority figures. What they said goes. It was the law. And this kind of plays into my second example of hierarchy. In the workplace, you don't question those with authority. That's just the way it goes. They have more experience, they're in a higher position than you. That's the way that the workplace was taught to me, levels of hierarchy. My third example is formal communication, where you would be using formal titles and minding a respectful tone. And the example that I have of this is whenever people are wearing their name tags and their titles on it, that was something that I would constantly look for when interacting with people in a professional environment. That way I am constantly referencing them the way that they're supposed to be referenced, and I'm formally communicating with them. That way there is no ill communication. And finally, the third value that I like to talk about is long-term orientation. The textbook definition of this is pretty long, but the things that I wanted to focus on was the fact that long-term orientation has the values of persistence, perseverance, and thriftiness. Three examples of this from my life would be family traditions, family business, and prioritizing quality. Family traditions. For me, family lineage and heritage is super important, where my family, my brothers, sisters, my mom, dad, everyone would be very prideful of it. If one of us had some small victory, we would use it as an excuse to celebrate and boast to coworkers, friends, or family friends. Family business example would be growing up. My grandpa would always constantly try and teach me about construction, something that he had been doing since he was a kid and well to this day. And on top of that, more recently, my grandpa has tried to get me to be a beekeeper. And funny enough, every time he visits, he gives us a jar of honey. And my third one is prioritizing quality. Some of the most popular fashion and food in the world is Italian. And I think it's important to talk about how in my family, we have recipes or clothing that we've passed down for generations, where the quality of this is so good that we want to share it with other generations of ourselves. And on top of that, we still have a blanket. We still have a blanket that my great grandmother, my great great grandmother had made. So this has been passed down for about 5 generations now, if I am the one to take it or if my brother and sister is. So, to summarize, as an Italian who didn't grow up in the most traditional household, these 3 values are still important to me. Individualism, large power distance, long-term orientation, they all played a role in molding me. So, some things that I notice is that it's not very black and white for these values. Kind of a gray line, leaning towards one value, but intermingling with the opposite. And that's all. Thank you.